42 missed calls. That's what the screen showed when she finally looked down at her phone that morning. 42 attempts from the man who'd spent her entire life acting like she barely existed. The same father who forgot her science fair trophy, who brushed off her homemade gifts, who told her she wasn't part of the real family this Christmas. Now his name flashed across her phone like a desperate prayer, and she had no intention of answering. Because what happened between that brutal text and this moment of panic would expose everything her perfect family had been hiding for years. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people. Her name was Marissa Blake, and by the time this was over, she'd prove that the best revenge isn't anger. It's living so well that the people who dismissed you can't look away. It started with a simple question. Marissa had texted her father asking what he wanted for Christmas, the same question she asked every year even though he never seemed to care about her gifts. This time, his response came fast and cold. "This year is just real family." 4 words that landed like a slap. No explanation, no apology, just a clear message that after 30-some years of trying to belong, she still didn't make the cut. She sat on the edge of her bed in her Tampa Bay villa, staring at those words until the screen went black. The morning sun warmed the hardwood floor beneath her feet, but inside her chest, something froze solid. She'd already packed her bags for Vermont, already wrapped presents for her niece and nephew, already booked a flight home for the holidays, knowing full well she'd be walking into a house where her sister Shannon got all the attention and she got the leftovers. But this text was different. This wasn't subtle favoritism or quiet neglect. This was her father drawing a line in the snow and shoving her to the wrong side of it. Right there, sitting among half-packed suitcases and carefully wrapped gifts, Marissa canceled her flight. She didn't do it out of rage, though that would have been justified. She did it because something inside her finally cracked open, and for the first time in her life, she asked herself a question that changed everything. Why was she still begging for a seat at a table that never saved one for her, comment excluded, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family? To understand why that text broke her, you'd have to walk back into the cold Vermont house where Marissa grew up. From the outside, the Blake family looked perfect. 2-story house with green shutters. Dad sang in the church choir. Shannon starred in every school play. But inside those walls, attention was a limited resource, and Shannon had claimed all of it before Marissa even knew how to ask. The golden child and the scapegoat. That's what psychologists call it when parents split their kids into roles, one who can do no wrong and one who can never do enough. Shannon got celebrated for breathing. Marissa got forgotten for winning. In 5th grade, Marissa took first place at the county science fair with a project on solar energy. Her teacher made a huge deal, gave her a special pin, called her brilliant in front of the whole school. At the awards assembly, Marissa scanned the bleachers looking for her parents, but only her mom showed up. She sat in the back, checked her watch, and left early because Shannon needed a ride home from choir practice. In the car afterward, Marissa held the little trophy in her lap and tried to explain how the judges said her work was impressive. Her mom smiled vaguely and said, "That's nice, honey," then spent the rest of the drive talking about Shannon's upcoming recital. The trophy ended up on a shelf in Marissa's room, dusty and unseen, just like the girl who earned it. Christmas was the worst. Every year, Marissa poured her heart into handmade gifts because she didn't have money for anything fancy. One December, she spent weeks knitting her father a scarf from leftover yarn a neighbor had given her. The stitches were crooked, but every loop felt like a piece of hope tied together. She wrapped it in plain paper and wrote his name in careful block letters. He opened it between a new set of golf clubs from Mom and a leather wallet from Shannon. He pulled it out, held it up, laughed a little, wrapped it once around his neck and said, "Thanks, kiddo," before going right back to admiring the clubs. By New Year's, the scarf had disappeared into the hall closet. That was the year Marissa stopped making gifts with her hands. She couldn't afford to keep giving pieces of herself to people who treated them like trash. Rumors swirled in their small town about the Blake family's perfect image, but nobody saw what happened behind closed doors. Some speculated that the parents' favoritism pushed Marissa into workaholism, that she spent her teenage years buried in code and textbooks, because it was the only place she felt valued. Others whispered that maybe Marissa was different in ways the family couldn't accept, that her ambitions and interests didn't fit the mold they'd built for their daughters. Whatever the reason, the message was clear. Shannon was the investment, Marissa was the backup plan. Type scapegoat if you know what it's like to be blamed for everything. By high school, Marissa had stopped showing her parents anything that mattered to her. She taught herself coding from library books while Shannon collected scholarship offers that Dad bragged about to anyone who'd listen. When Marissa's guidance counselor pulled her aside senior year and told her quietly that her grades and test scores could get her into a top engineering program in Texas, she traced the palm trees on the brochure like someone touching another life. She told her parents about the offer, and her mom frowned. "Texas is so far," she said, voice tight with something that sounded like concern but felt more like control. "Why not stay closer? Maybe UVM or community college for a bit." Her dad shrugged and said not everybody had to leave home to be happy. Shannon had settled at a fancy college just a day's drive away, and that was good enough for them. Marissa chose Texas anyway. She signed the papers, accepted the scholarship, and when her father told her he didn't understand why she wanted to run so far, she just smiled and said she wanted to see what warm weather felt like at Christmas. What she didn't say was that Vermont felt like a coat that no longer fit, and nobody was going to help her take it off. The night before she left, she sat on the front steps with her suitcase beside her, looking out at the quiet road and the street lights glowing soft against the dark. She made herself a promise that she didn't speak out loud. One day, she'd build a life where she didn't have to beg to be seen. It took more than a decade, but she kept that promise. Marissa joined a tiny software startup in Austin and became one of the early engineers who stuck through every brutal night, every failed pitch, every year when salaries came late but the dreams stayed loud. She worked in a cramped office with bad coffee and a team that believed in something bigger than themselves. When the company finally sold for $200 million, Marissa walked away with just over $7 million. Enough to breathe. Enough to buy the $2 million beach villa in Florida with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught every shade of sunset. Enough to prove she'd made it on her own terms. But here's the thing, her family barely noticed. They never asked about her work, never tried to understand what she did for a living, never celebrated the milestones she'd fought for. Shannon was still the golden child with the perfect husband and the adorable kids. Marissa was still the complicated one who drifted too far west and chosen a life they couldn't comprehend. So when that text came through calling her not real family, it wasn't shocking. It was just the first time someone had said out loud what she'd felt her entire life. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding beneath the surface. 42 missed calls, more than her father had given her in all the years of her life combined. The morning after she canceled her flight and decided to stay in Florida for Christmas, Marissa stood barefoot in her villa kitchen watching her phone light up over and over again. The notification pulsed like a warning she couldn't outrun. Outside the sliding glass doors, the Gulf breeze pressed soft against the windows and palm trees swayed in the warm December air. The kind of peace she dreamed about as a kid, freezing in Vermont. But that morning, the silence inside the house felt sharper than any cold she'd known. She turned the phone face down on the counter because she couldn't stand to see his name one more time. Her Aunt Valerie texted first, the one person in the family who'd never made her feel like an outsider. "Are you doing okay, kiddo?" Valerie had always been different, always asked real questions and waited for real answers. Marissa typed back slowly. "I just need a second. Dad said only real family this year." Valerie's response came fast. "That man forgets who raised him. You come spend Christmas with us in Maine if you want. We got plenty of room." Then her friend Rebecca called, the old roommate from Seattle who knew Marissa better than most of her blood relatives ever had. "Hey, what happened? You sound off," Rebecca said, voice warm and steady on the other end of the line. Marissa told her everything. The text, the canceled flight, the 42 missed calls from a man who suddenly cared now that she wasn't coming home. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then said something that hit different. "You've done everything right." Sometimes parents don't see the grown-up in front of them. They only see the kid they built in their heads. You're not alone, Marissa. You have more family than the ones who share your last name. Speculation started bubbling in Marissa's mind. What did they want from her now? Was it money? Did they suddenly realize she had means and resources they might need? Or was it about appearances, about explaining to their small Vermont town and their church community why their daughter wasn't coming home for the holidays? Reports suggest families like the Blakes, who build their identity on a perfect public image, panic when cracks start showing. When the scapegoat stops playing along, the whole system falls apart. If this shocked you, comment revenge below. Marissa walked through her villa that afternoon with her phone still buzzing in her hand. She pushed open the door to the guest room across from hers and stood there for a long moment. It was mostly empty, just a soft cotton throw on the bed and a tall lamp in the corner. But suddenly, she could picture it differently. She could see Valerie there, laughing over morning coffee. She could imagine Rebecca and her husband on the couch watching some ridiculous Christmas movie. She could picture cousins who'd never judged her, friends from work who were planning to spend the holidays alone, all the people who had shown up for her over the years in ways her parents never quite managed. An idea formed, not quite a plan yet, but something close, something sharp and warm at the same time. What if she didn't run from the pain this Christmas? What if she walked straight through it and came out the other side holding something they'd never given her? Chosen family, real connection. A celebration that wasn't about obligation or guilt or trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for her. She opened her laptop and started typing messages. To Valerie, to Rebecca, to her cousin Ryan who'd always treated her like she mattered, to coworkers who'd become friends during those long startup nights in Austin, to people who saw her, really saw her, and chose to stick around anyway. The invitations were simple. I'm hosting Christmas at my place in Florida. No obligations, no drama, just good people, good food, and a beach that never freezes. You in? The responses came fast. Valerie said she'd drive down. Rebecca booked a flight within an hour. Ryan replied with 3 exclamation points and a gif of someone doing a happy dance. By evening, Marissa had 8 people confirmed for a Christmas that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with the family she'd built on her own terms. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, she smiled without forcing it. Her father's phone calls kept coming, 42 turning into 45, then 50. She didn't answer a single one, because this Christmas wasn't about them anymore. It was about her. And what she was about to do next would flip the whole script. Christmas week arrived warm and golden in Florida. While her parents and Shannon gathered in that cold Vermont house for their real family celebration, Marissa's villa filled with laughter that echoed off the high ceilings and out toward the ocean. Valerie showed up with homemade pies and stories that made everyone cry-laugh around the dinner table. Rebecca and her husband brought board games and stayed up late playing cards on the back deck under string lights. Ryan arrived with his girlfriend and a bottle of wine, saying this was the first Christmas in years he'd actually looked forward to. They cooked together in Marissa's bright kitchen, passing ingredients and inside jokes back and forth like people who genuinely enjoyed each other. They walked barefoot on the beach at sunset, took photos with the waves crashing behind them, and talked about everything and nothing in that easy way that only happens when nobody's keeping score. Marissa posted a few pictures on social media without even thinking about it at first. Just casual shots of her villa decorated with lights, the table set for 10 people, her chosen family laughing in the background with the Florida coastline stretching out behind them. The caption was simple but pointed. Grateful for the real ones who show up. Best Christmas ever. What happened next was something Marissa didn't fully anticipate, though maybe part of her hoped for it. Her family saw the posts. Shannon saw them. Her parents saw them. And suddenly, the perfect image they'd worked so hard to maintain started cracking wide open. Because while they were gathered in their Vermont living room pretending everything was fine, their complicated daughter was living proof that you could build something better without them. The villa. The success. The community of people who chose to love her without conditions. All of it right there on display for everyone to see. The extended family started asking questions. Uncle Tom called, voice tight with confusion and maybe a little anger, asking why Marissa wasn't home and why the hell Carl and Linda had told people she was too busy to make it this year. Cousins started commenting on the photos, saying it looked amazing and asking why they'd heard she wasn't invited. Neighbors from the old Vermont street allegedly began whispering at church, asking Linda point-blank why her daughter was spending Christmas in Florida instead of with family. Reports suggest the Blakes scrambled to save face, making excuses about Marissa's work schedule and her independent lifestyle. But the truth was already out there. She'd been excluded, dismissed, told she wasn't real family, and now everyone knew it. Type yes if you want to see how the family reacted when they realized what they'd lost. The calls intensified. 50 missed calls became 60. Her father's voicemails started sounding different, less demanding, and more desperate. "Marissa, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Call me back." Her mother left messages too, voice shaking in that way it did when she was worried about what other people thought more than what was actually true. "Honey, people are asking questions. This doesn't look good. Please call us so we can sort this out." But Marissa didn't call back. She sat on her back deck with Valerie on Christmas evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon and feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, uncomplicated peace. Valerie squeezed her hand and said what Marissa had needed someone to say her whole life. "You did the right thing. You don't owe them your suffering just to make them comfortable." Shannon stayed silent through all of it, which somehow hurt worse than the original text. The golden child who'd never had to fight for attention, who'd never been told she wasn't real family, couldn't even send a message asking if Marissa was okay. Some people speculated online about whether Shannon felt guilty or if she was just following their parents' lead, too scared to break ranks. Either way, her silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, other family members started choosing sides. Ryan posted a comment on one of Marissa's photos saying, "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. Proud of you, cuz." Valerie shared the beach sunset photo with a caption that read, "This is what love looks like when it's real." Even some of the extended family who'd stayed quiet for years started reaching out privately, apologizing for not speaking up sooner, admitting they'd seen the favoritism but didn't know how to address it. The villa, which Marissa had bought as a symbol of her independence, became something even more powerful. It became proof that she didn't need their approval to build a life worth living. It became the stage where she showed the world what chosen family could look like when you stopped waiting for people who'd never valued you in the first place. And the real kicker, the real family, Christmas her father had been so determined to protect turned out to be hollow without the daughter they'd spent years dismissing. Because once the scapegoat stops absorbing the blame and starts living out loud, the whole dysfunctional system collapses. Marissa's phone kept lighting up with her father's name, that number climbing higher and higher. 42 calls that morning had become over 70 by New Year's Eve, but she wasn't interested in answering anymore. She'd spent a lifetime begging for a seat at their table. Now they were begging for a chair at hers, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone watching. Here's what nobody tells you about golden child and scapegoat dynamics. They don't just hurt the kid who gets blamed for everything. They poison the whole family system. Studies show that between 40% and 65% of people in families with clear favoritism experience feelings of being overlooked on a weekly basis. The golden child grows up terrified of losing their status, performing constantly to keep the praise coming. The scapegoat grows up believing they're fundamentally unlovable, that no matter what they achieve, it'll never be enough. And the parents, they build a house of cards that falls apart the second someone refuses to play their assigned role. Marissa's story isn't unique, but her response was. Instead of begging for reconciliation or letting the rejection destroy her, she built something they couldn't touch. A Christmas filled with people who chose her. A home that felt warm all the way through, not just on the surface. A life that proved you don't need your family of origin's approval to create your own version of belonging. The speculation about what happens next is still swirling. Will her parents eventually own up to their favoritism and apologize? Will Shannon ever break her silence and reach out? Some believe the family will attempt reconciliation once the embarrassment fades and they realize what they've truly lost. Others think the bridge has burned completely, that some relationships can't be salvaged once the truth comes into the light this harshly. Only time will tell if the Blakes can move past the roles they assign their daughters and see both of them as real, whole people deserving of equal love. But one thing's certain, Marissa isn't waiting around to find out. Her phone still shows those missed calls, a number she'll never forget. A reminder of the moment her family finally wanted her, but only after she'd stopped needing them. She looks at that number sometimes when she's sitting on her deck watching the sunset and she feels something unexpected. Not anger, not even sadness, just a quiet certainty that she made the right choice. 3 questions before you go. First, hit like if this story made you think about your own family dynamics. Second, comment below which moment hit you hardest, the exclusion text, the 42 calls, or the Christmas she built without them. Third, subscribe because stories like this need to be told, and families need to understand that real love doesn't play favorites. She'd spent a lifetime begging for a seat at their table. Now they were begging for a chair at hers. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's living so fully and freely that the people who dismissed you can't help but notice what they gave up. Marissa learned what so many scapegoats eventually discover. The family you choose can heal wounds the family you're born into created. And a beach villa in Florida, filled with laughter and people who genuinely see you, will always feel more like home than a cold Vermont house where you were never really welcome.